Hello, welcome back to our YouTube channel today. I'm thrilled to take you on a horror, thriller movie from 2024 called Double Blind. And spoilers ahead, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. A research facility called Blackwood Pharmaceuticals is conducting an experimental drug trial called Phase 1 Clinical Trials. Blackwood Pharmaceuticals had offered a large sum of money to those who volunteered to become test subjects, promising that this experiment would help them better understand how a new drug affects the body before they give it to those with medical conditions. There are multiple individuals who have volunteered to become test subjects, and one of them is Claire, a young woman who has been fending for herself for most of her life and is in need of money. Claire arrived at the basement of the Blackwood facility, where the experiment is to be conducted, and went straight to the room assigned for the female subjects laying down. To finally get some rest, one of her roommates sat on the bed beside hers and cheerfully introduced herself as Alice. Seemed like a nice girl, but she was too talkative and annoying for CLA, who just wanted to take a rest. Claire was just about to go to sleep when an announcement blared through the speakers telling them to go to the exam room. In the exam room, the subjects realized that there was neither Wi-Fi nor reception in the facility and were disappointed. Dr. Burke, the doctor who is supposed to supervise the trial, entered the room and introduced herself. She reiterated that the Phase 1 clinical trial is to study the safety of a new drug called Abatinib 4. The subjects had to stay in the facility for 5 days in total, without any communication to the outside world, and they are not allowed to leave the facility at all. The subjects also have to take dosages of the new drug. The dosage would begin at 25 mg and rise up to 85 mg, but no more than that. Dr. Burke then informed the subjects that the trial would be double-blind, which is a randomized trial where neither the participants nor the researchers know which subject is receiving what treatment. This helps minimize the placebo effect and allows the researchers to not unconsciously make any biased interpretations of the study results. Dr. Burke reassured the subjects that the dosage is fairly minimal. Therefore, the trial would go smoothly and no harm would be done to the subjects. Dr. Burke then walked out of the exam room, leaving the nurses to hand over the dosage to the subjects for them to take for the whole day. The subjects were constantly checked by the nurses to see if there would be any side effects, but so far the subjects have felt completely normal. But as CLA was lying down on the bed with Allison blabbering beside her, she suddenly felt the urge to vomit and rushed to the restroom on her way back to the room. She bumped into a fellow test subject named Amir, a medical student who decided to volunteer in the trial to prove himself because he applied for the summer internship with Blackwood Pharmaceuticals. Later that night, CLA was trying to sleep, but for some reason she was struggling to do so. She left the room and went to the lounge room, where she found that, just like her, the other subjects were also having a hard time falling asleep. The subjects were worried. But Dr. Burke reassured them that it was just normal insomnia, and it wouldn't be a problem at all for 30 hours straight. None of the subjects slept, and they mostly spent their time in the lounge room. During those hours, Claire and Allison also got closer. Dr. Burke called the researchers to inquire about the scans she sent them. Dr. Burke was worried, as she Bailey, that whatever drug the subjects took, it's going straight for the central nervous system and it's causing serious brain inflammation. She tried to ask the person on the other line about the trial, but since it was a double-blind trial, Dr. Burke was not allowed to get any form of information. The person on the other line asked about subject 7-second scan, and Dr. Burke clarified that there is only one scan. The 2 images of subject 7 scans were both taken during the same scan. Dr. Burke expressed her worry because there was already so much growth in just one scan, but the person on the other line stayed silent. That was until a new voice was heard. On the other line, the person introduced himself as George Bannon, Senior VP for Research, whose interest seems to be piqued after hearing about the growth after taking another dosage of the new drug. Claire was brought in for a CT scan inside the scanner. CLA started panicking when she suddenly remembered a traumatic past that involved her being locked up in an enclosed space. The next day, the subjects were starting to doubt the experiment when they realized that the dosage they had to take had been increased. Again, the maximum dosage they had to get was only 85 mg, but now it seems like they had to take more than that. Dr. Burke entered the room and reassured the subjects that it was completely fine if anyone refuses to continue. They are allowed to leave the facility, but those who agree to continue will be given a bonus payment of $30,000 for each subject. Everyone's doubts were lifted upon hearing the amount of money they were going to receive, everyone but Claire and Amir, who look both uncertain in the lounge. The subjects celebrated their bonus payment and Allison asked CLA to dance with her. Unexpectedly, the subjects suddenly felt exhausted, and later on we see Dr. Burke looking worriedly at the worn-out subjects she called George Bannon, requesting to stop the trial as the subjects' whole immune systems had gone haywire. But George Bannon refused to stop the experiment and ordered Dr. Burke to keep up in the dose. The subjects were hanging around the lounge chatting while CLA was almost falling asleep before she could fall asleep completely. Allison talked to her and woke her up. The two of them talked, but one comment from Claire offended Allison, who walked away from the group. Amir, on the other hand, sneaked into Dr. Burke's office and accessed her computer. He found a USB device and checked its contents, being amazed by what he saw. CLA was still sitting with the other subjects when she noticed Allison not moving at all. From where she was seated, CLA approached Allison and found her asleep. She tried to wake Allison, but the girl was unresponsive and blood started leaking out of her closed eyes, mouth, nose, and ears. The other subjects approached as Allison started convulsing on the floor, her body twitching and mouth foaming until she stopped moving. Paul checked Allison's pulse and realized that she'd already gone. Dr. Burke was standing a few feet away from them, staring at Allison in fear. Suddenly, an alarm blared out, and a lockdown protocol was initiated. Dr. Burke and the subjects ran towards the exit, but Dr. Burke had been impaled by the sharp ends of the closing gate. Ryan and Marcus quickly tried to help the doctor, but it was already too late. As Dr. Burke took her last breath after muttering an apology, Amir ran towards them and learned of what happened when he noticed CLA closing her eyes. He grabbed her face and told everyone not to sleep as it would kill them. He told them about what he found on Dr. Burke's computer. It turns out that for the last 4 days their brains have been pushed into overdrive, and now they're shutting down. Amir informed everyone that the gate wouldn't open until the clock runs down, which means they have to wait in the basement all the while trying to stay awake. They made preparations on how they could help each other stay awake, and Air told everyone not to take any stimulant or drink any coffee, using a metaphor. Air explained that if a brain is a car on fire, they would still be able to steer and the momentum would keep that car moving. This is an example of what happens if they stay awake, but if they take stimulants, it would just be like throwing petrol on the flames. He encouraged everyone to stay awake and wait for the gates to open. Once it opens, he believes that they will receive immediate help. The subjects did whatever they had to do to stay awake, while Amir was constantly tracking their progress. That Dr. Burke's dead body sat up. He turned to look, but saw that Dr. Burke was still very much dead, and told himself it's just a mild hallucination. Meanwhile, CLA had been hearing voices, and something about the painted wall in the lounge felt weird to her. She went to Dr. Burke's office and checked the computer to discover that Blackwood had intentionally chosen her as one of the participants, as they believed no one would care if she died in the high-risk trials. The hallucinations were getting worse, and Marcus had been the first one to fall for them. He could hear someone whistling from somewhere, and as he followed the sound, the room gradually got darker and darker, until it was pitch black. The next thing we see is that Marcus is already dead. The others found their bodies, and it seems like that was just the beginning of something worse for them. Claire could feel herself drifting away, but before she could completely pass out, she slammed her hand on the open stove, effectively waking herself up by burning her own hand. She went to the lounge room where everyone is and suggested breaking through a wall that she believed could give them a way out of the sealed area. They realized that their efforts had been futile when they saw a steel wall on the other side of the stone wall. Disappointed, Claire went to Air and found out that it was actually Air's fault that they were locked down. He accessed Dr. Burke's computer and alerted Blackwood about a security breach. Amir was distressed because of his own mistake, but Claire told him to make up for it by helping them. An idea suddenly popped into Amir's mind, and he suggested that methyl iodide poisoning could help them. Methyl iodide poisoning mimics the effects of ischemic stroke, which would stop blood flow to the brain and normally result in death. But Air believes that with the side effects of the drug they were given, there may be a grace period, and if they take TPA after a dose of methyl iodide, there will be enough time for the enzyme to break up a clot and restore blood flow to the brain. Meanwhile, a frustrated suddenly became suspicious of Air, who seemed to know everything. He told Paul and Vanessa of his suspicions that Air might already be working under Blackwood and was just with them to make sure they wouldn't escape. Paul told Claire about it when suddenly the power went out. Claire and Paul looked for the fuse to turn the power back on, and Claire had to fight through the hallucinations after turning the power back on. Rye and the others, except for CLA, blamed it on Amir, whom they claimed was sabotaging them. Amir was tied up, and Rye wanted to torture Amir to get him to admit whatever he's hiding. Amir told him about his methyl iodide suggestion, and Paul, being the one with the clearer head, decided to listen and create a methyl iodide, which Claire volunteered to try first, to see if it worked. While Paul was busy and Claire was watching over Mirror, Vanessa confronted Ray and told him that she saw him tripping the fuse. Ray admitted that he wanted Air to fall asleep so he could prove that Amir didn't take the new drug like they did. Vanessa offered her help and told Ray that she's going to sedate Air once CLA is distracted. Once the metal iodide was done, CLA, Paul, and Ray gathered around to proceed with injecting the dose into Claire, leaving Air unguarded. Vanessa took that time to approach Air, but she was confused when she saw her own body on the ground. Vanessa was hallucinating, and next thing they knew, Vanessa was bleeding and convulsing until she died. Ray put Vanessa's body on the bed and found a piece of paper inside her pocket. He unfolded it and read that it had been Air's fault, that they had been locked down, which made him furious. Meanwhile, CLA was standing in front of the painted wall again. She started hallucinating, but she was able to grab a smell of salt that woke her up, tapping on the wall. CLA discovered that there's a secret room behind it and told Paul about her discovery. She and Paul decided to break through the wall and enter the secret room, leaving Air, who began hallucinating about Dr. Claire, and Paul found a door made of stainless steel and assumed that it was an elevator. Paul suggested taking the so-called elevator and leaving the others, but then they heard Air screaming furious. Ray attempted to kill Amir, but Amir broke free from his restraint and repeatedly stabbed Ray when CLA and Paul came in. Amir had already lost his mind. Amir chased the two of them with a knife, and Paul was the first to reach the secret room. He initially planned on waiting for Claire, but seeing Air so close behind her, he decided to leave Claire behind and enter the elevator. He started filming himself, believing that he would be able to escape the facility alive and wanting to tell the world about what happened. But then Paul quickly found out that the so-called elevator he was in was actually an incinerator, and he screamed as he was burned alive. There was only a minute left before the doors opened as CLA and Air played hide and seek. Both subjects were already getting too weak, and trying to stop themselves from passing out is becoming impossible. The two of them fell to the ground, so close to losing consciousness. When the doors opened, Amir weakly walked through the doors and was met by the facility staff. He thought he was saved, but that thought was washed away when he saw the gun. CLA was just a second away from completely losing consciousness. When she heard the gunshot, she saw men in white searching the area and found a Myers dead body. Hearing the men approaching, CLA spread blood all over her face and put herself in the body bag, pretending to be dead. The men brought the bodies out of the facility to throw them away. CLA stood up, and seeing her alive distracted the men at the front, causing the truck to hit the pavement and flip over after the accident. CLA was brought to the hospital, and what happened to the Blackwood facility spread on the news. But Blackwood Pharmaceuticals didn't get punished for the failed experiments. Instead, all the blame was put on Dr. Burke, and Blackwood Pharmaceuticals was deemed to be completely innocent. CLA was Kados with little chance of recovery, as the radio played the speech of George Bannon talking about how Blackwood Pharmaceuticals would keep on thriving and nothing would stand in their way. Clay's eyes flew open. Did you like our movie recap? Subscribe and comment if you like our video. See you next time.